Breaking news! Just moments ago, the world was rocked by a startling story surrounding military drills. It's Western Europe, 2025. In a panic, Polish President Karol Nawrocki shut the border with Belarus. Why did he resort to such drastic measures? What did Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko tell him that left him speechless? And why is there already talk about a disgrace for Poland in Europe? Stick around, and you'll be shocked by the unfolding details. On that fateful day, Alexander Grigorievich Lukashenko appeared as if he were preparing not for a diplomatic meeting but for an inspection at a farm storage facility. Dressed in a simple gray suit that hung slightly loose on him, he strode with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems without red tape. His thick brows were furrowed, giving him an especially focused demeanor. The phone on his desk blinked insistently, almost urging him to take action. The West 2025 exercises had just concluded. Tanks thundered across training fields, and artillery units practiced their maneuvers. Fighter pilots touched down on the tarmac, fatigued yet relieved after a week of intense drills. Everything had gone according to plan, yet a monumental uproar erupted. The European press had blown things out of proportion, suggesting that Russia and Belarus were not merely staging exercises but gearing up for an assault on Warsaw. The first to buckle under the pressure was the inexperienced, ambitious President Nawrocki. His stylishly combed hair and carefully tailored suits were designed to impress in European forums. But they did little to hide his insecurity. Faced with nebulous threats and shadows of danger, he hastily ordered the closure of the border with Belarus. In Warsaw, it was framed as a decisive action for Europe's safety, but in Minsk, it drew nothing but a sardonic smile from Lukashenko. Fear struck him. Lukashenko whispered to his aide about the frantic dispatches. He saw our tanks at drills and immediately locked the gates. He picked up the phone, having already dialed Nawrocki's number. The connection was instant. The Polish president's voice quivered, attempting to sound authoritative, but the tremor in his speech betrayed a sleepless night. A chorus of advisors rattled in his head. Russia poses a threat. Belarus is unpredictable. We must show strength. Mr. Lukashenko, he began, a strained tone in his voice, your drills are causing alarm in Warsaw. We view them as a potential threat. Your Majesty, interrupted Lukashenko, his voice calm yet deep, as if discussing a grain harvest rather than international politics. What are you so afraid of? We've never bothered anyone. You invent your enemies. Silence hung in the air. Nawrocki, gasping for words, finally exhaled in acknowledgement. Lukashenko leaned into the call, smiling wryly. And what about your NATO exercises? Is that friendship? When your soldiers march under Polish flags alongside Americans on our borders, do we complain? We stay quiet because it's your affair. But, Karol, remember, when German soldiers marched through your streets, it was Soviet soldiers who came to your rescue. And now, you build walls against those who saved you. Isn't that shameful? That statement struck deep, silencing the Polish president. The weight of history loomed behind Lukashenko like a powerful specter of victory. Urgent news is unfolding, a polarization that has sent shockwaves across Europe. Just moments ago, the president of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, abruptly closed the border with Belarus. An unexpected call from Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko left Nawrocki speechless. What could have been said to strike such panic? As whispers of disgrace for Poland spread through Europe, stay tuned till the end to discover the explosive details. Nawrocki, feeling the heat of unknown threats as he hurriedly sealed the border, was convinced he was safeguarding Europe. Meanwhile, in Minsk, a smirk curled on Lukashenko's lips as he leaned back, knowing his tanks on display had instilled fear in a young president with little experience. The tension mounted, electrifying the air in the room as Lukashenko dialed his opponent's number. The connection buzzed to life, revealing Nawrocki's quivering voice, striving for composure. Mr. Lukashenko, he choked out, the weight of Europe's uncertainty hanging between them. Your maneuvers are causing alarm in Warsaw. We see them as a possible threat. King. Lukashenko interrupted with calm authority, likening his tone to that of a farmer discussing this year's grain yield. What are you afraid of? We've never harmed anyone. You create enemies in your mind. Silence enveloped the call. Did Naraki, suffocated by fear, truly consider exercises a threat? Lukashenko smiled. And your NATO exercises? Is that friendship? Your soldiers march with Americans near our borders, yet we remain silent. But let me remind you, when the halls of your city echoed with marching Germans, it was Soviet soldiers who came to your aid. And now you turn your back on those who saved you. Each word reverberated, colliding with Naraki's reasoning, pushing him into stillness. Lukashenko seized his moment. Your tanks would not have saved Warsaw. It was the Red Army that halted the Wehrmacht. Soviet soldiers rest in your land without demands for memorials, but you close your doors on their descendants. Is that not shameful? Naraki coughed, scrambling for words, but silence persisted. Listen, Lukashenko's voice softened. We've never threatened anyone. It's Europe that thrives on fear of Russia. You Poles are merely strumming their strings. Yet, Naraki wrestled with doubt, ancestral memories swirling in a tempestuous whirlwind of confusion and realization. Could they have constructed an enemy out of myth? A shiver ran through him as he pondered this troubling truth, one that conflicted with the pillars of Brussels. The eerie stillness of his office felt charged with history. With every footfall on the aged parquet, echoes of his predecessors rang in his ears. Their portraits watched him, seemingly weighing the fate of Poland. He turned his gaze to the bustling streets outside, the warmth of anticipation touching him. The unending clamor of the city sprang to life. Was it truly possible they had forgotten the sacrifices of the past? Just then, the shrill ring of the phone jolted him back to his present reality. The call from Brussels awaited, anxious voices clamoring for reports. The border is closed, unwavering in its stance. But Naraki felt trapped. He sensed the truth inches away but feared that any spoken word now would sound hollow. As he succumbed to a heavy sigh, he murmured to himself, what if we have forgotten? In Minsk, Lukashenko hung up, aware of the impact he'd just made. Alone, he reflected on the call, the absurdity of a leader frightened by shadows. The world outside his office was bustling, alive with the ordinary, yet a deeper rapport with history reverberated in his mind. He picked up the phone once more, dialing a familiar number. On the other end, Vladimir showed rich amusement at the news he had heard. Laughter erupted between them. You would have thought he was fleeing from a ghost, Lukashenko quipped. He's closing borders because of tanks in the field, and I told him we were merely digging potatoes. Both leaders enjoyed a moment of levity, the tension lost in their laughter. But the stakes were higher than mere banter. The world hasn't changed, Sasha, Putin said thoughtfully. They will always fear us as long as we remain strong. And so the dialogue continued, resonating with the weight of history, each word a reminder of the legacies they bear. The battlefield of narratives is not just about borders, it's about the ideologies and memories that shape their realities. In the previous part, tensions rose as Polish President Karol Nawrocki faced an unexpected and unsettling phone call with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. While Nawrocki attempted to assert his position regarding military exercises, Lukashenko pointedly reminded him of the historical ties between their nations, leaving the Polish president speechless. But consider this, over the past few years, sanctions have piled on Belarus and Russia like an avalanche. No country has faced such pressure. All we want is friendship, he paused, then added with a wry tone, by the way, Trump lifted sanctions and opened air links, while you close your borders. That's not the way, King. A heavy sigh escaped somewhere on the line. Now, speaking not just to Nawrocki, Lukashenko addressed Europe itself. In the past, the world respected us, industrialization, Soviet science, space. That was our shared heritage. But now, all you do is impose sanctions. Have you forgotten that without the Soviet engine, you wouldn't even have an airplane? The facts resounded like iron. Nawrocki remained silent, realizing he was losing the debate as Lukashenko's arguments formed an impenetrable wall. As the conversation dragged on for another minute, it ultimately fell silent. But Lukashenko felt a sense of completion. He had expressed everything he needed to say. Leaning back in his chair, with a smirk, he turned to his aide. He panicked over tanks on the exercises and decided to lock himself away. Meanwhile, we were simply digging up potatoes. Laughter erupted in the room. Meanwhile, Karol Nawrocki sat in his office in Warsaw, gazing out at the night city through the grand windows of the presidential palace. The streetlights glimmered, cars buzzed, and pedestrians hurried. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Yet, within him, an unsettling feeling grew, as if the once familiar world began to crack. The phone conversation with Lukashenko replayed in his mind. He was used to hearing his advisors utter the same words: Russia, threat; Belarus, puppet; Kremlin, the source of instability. But the voice from Minsk had a different tone, calm, heavy, assured. It didn't sound like a threat at all. Instead, it carried the weight of something deeper, an accusation that felt all too justified. As he adjusted his tie, out of habit despite being alone, he glanced at the reports on his desk. NATO analyses, press summaries, plans for bolstering borders, all shouted danger. But one phrase echoed louder in his mind: and now you close the door to those who saved you. His feet made heavy thuds on the floor, reverberating in the stillness of the room. The old parquet remembered countless predecessors, each stepping into a similar fate, deciding which way Poland would turn. He looked at the portraits hanging on the walls, all stern faces of former presidents. It felt as though they too were listening to his thoughts. What if he's right? Nawrocki suddenly pondered. Have we really forgotten? My grandfather spoke of Soviet soldiers entering Warsaw with gratitude, though he was Polish to his core. Could it be that we've created our own enemy? This thought unsettled him the most. It contradicted Brussels' policy, speeches at forums, and promises to allies. He wanted to shake it off, but Lukashenko's words had taken root. Karol poured himself a glass of water, his hands trembled, and for the first time in months, he felt a wave of deep uncertainty flood over him. Politics trained him to be tough, but it never prepared him for the truth. He approached the window again. Below, sentries stood guard. Young men, contemporaries of those soldiers who perished in Warsaw back in '45. What would Poland be like had it not been for the Red Army? The phone on his desk flickered again. This time, it was a call from Brussels. Advisors demanded reports, allies awaited confirmations. The border is closed. Warsaw resolutely stands firm. Nawrocki rubbed his face with his hand but didn't respond. Any phrase he uttered now would feel hollow. Lukashenko's speech had planted a splinter in his soul, and the longer he remained silent, the deeper it embedded. He sank heavily into his chair, bowed his head, and whispered to himself, what if we've truly forgotten everything? Meanwhile, the phone in Minsk came to life again. This time, Lukashenko dialed a number long familiar, nearly affectionate. The line connected him to Moscow. On the other end, with a slight rasp, Vladimir Putin responded. Sasha, I've heard about the Polish president, he began with a smirk. They're making a stir over our exercises. Lukashenko leaned back, toying with a pencil. What stir, Volodya? The guy's scared of his own shadows. I called him. You should have heard him tremble. Chirping about threats. Before the tension could dissipate, he declared, but let me remind you. We pose no threat. We were just digging potatoes, while he locked his gates. The quiet laughter between them eased the accumulated stress of recent days. Yet I told him directly, Lukashenko continued, it's Europe that fears Russia. Without the Russian threat, they'd feel lost. The history was there, Europe had often relied on them for salvation. Exactly, Putin acknowledged. They forget so often, it seems. Almost like selective memory. Lukashenko brightened. I reminded him, your tanks wouldn't have saved Warsaw without the Red Army. Poland wouldn't even exist. And he went silent, as if truly contemplating. Putin paused, processing the weight of those words. Indeed, sometimes one statement carries more power than 100 sanctions. Sanctions? Lukashenko echoed with a hint of amusement. They think they can break us with those, but we only grow stronger. No other nation could withstand what we've endured. But we can, he continued, gazing at the night skyline of Minsk, serene and confident. You know what's most amusing, Volodya? What's that? Putin prompted. I told him, Trump lifted sanctions and opened air links with the US. An American did that, yet you, a Pole, are closing your borders. Who's really the ally, and who's the enemy? Putin chuckled softly. The world may change, Sasha, but one thing remains. They will always fear us as long as we are strong. Suddenly, a new sound broke through the conversation, a heavy knock on the door. Who could it be? Is it an ally? Or the enemy they've been guarding against? The Polish president, Karol Nawrocki, found himself engulfed in thoughts, haunted by one particular phrase from Alexander Lukashenko: now, you are closing your doors to those who once saved you. An unsettling stillness mingled with the echoes of his footsteps as he paced in his office. Each stride felt heavy on the aged floorboards, worn by countless predecessors who had confronted their own pivotal decisions that shaped Poland's future. As the portraits of past leaders observed him with stern expressions, Nawrocki couldn't shake a creeping doubt. What if he's right, he pondered, remembering tales from his grandfather about the Soviet soldiers who liberated Warsaw, tales recounted with gratitude despite his unwavering Polish identity. Could it be that they had conjured an enemy out of their own fears? The thought sent shivers down his spine. It clashed violently with the narrative spun in Brussels and the convictions he paraded at international forums. Filling a glass with water, his hands trembled, revealing a vulnerability he hadn't confronted in months. His political training had equipped him to be resolute, but how to respond when facing a truth that rattled the very foundations of his beliefs? He stepped to the window, where guards stood watch, young men reminiscent of those who perished under Warsaw's skies back in 1945. Without the Red Army, he reflected, this palace, and perhaps Poland itself, would not exist. Suddenly, his phone flickered to life, ringing insistently. It was Brussels, demanding updates. Allies awaited reassurance. The border was closed. Warsaw stood firm. Nawrocki rubbed his face in frustration, feeling words escape him. Any response would feel disingenuous now. Lukashenko's words had planted deep in his soul, a splinter of doubt that burrowed deeper the longer he remained silent. He slumped back into his chair, head bowed, whispering, "What if we've truly forgotten?" Meanwhile, in Minsk, the phone surprisingly sprung to life in Lukashenko's office. With a familiar ease, he dialed a number that felt as comfortable as an old friend. The connection crackled, merging him with Moscow. "Have you heard about the Polish president?" came Vladimir's teasing voice, carrying a light rasp. "They've stirred quite the commotion over our exercises." Lukashenko reclined, twirling a pencil, a smirk forming. "What commotion, Volodya?" "He's terrified of his own shadows. I called him, and you should have heard him quiver. All he kept saying was threat." Curiously, a juxtaposition of power and vulnerability lingered between them. Would the echoes of these conversations echo throughout Europe, shifting perceptions? Each shared laugh between them concealed a more profound reality beneath. The fragile line dividing friend from foe was ever so thin. The question was, who would dare to cross it? In the previous part, the tension weighed heavily on the newly elected Polish president Karol Nawrocki. He grappled with unsettling memories and doubts, echoing the words of Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko about historical alliances and the essence of threats. As he replayed their phone conversation in his mind, a connection formed between their pasts, raising questions of loyalty and remembrance. On the line, Vladimir Putin's voice emerged, slightly raspy, yet with a hint of amusement. "So, you've heard about the Polish president, I presume," he teased. "They sure stirred up a fuss over those exercises." Lukashenko leaned back, twirling a pencil between his fingers. "What fuss, Volody?" The guy seemed scared of his own shadow. "I called him up. You should have heard him tremble through the receiver. Threat, threat, he kept saying." Laughter echoed down the line. "I suppose the threat of a potato is serious business," Putin replied with a chuckle. The tension from days past seemed to dissolve into the air. "But I made it clear," Lukashenko continued, his tone more serious. "We pose no threats to anyone. It's just a trend in Europe. They fear Russia. They can't function without a bogeyman." A sudden realization struck Lukashenko. How many times has Europe been saved because of us, he asserted. They conveniently forget. It's as if they only remember what's beneficial to them. Putin's silence lingered momentarily, reflecting on the truth behind those words. It seems you've hit the mark, Sasha, he finally replied. Sometimes one truth outweighs 100 sanctions. What sanctions? Lukashenko scoffed. They think that will break us. Yet, we stand stronger. No one else could withstand this pressure. But we endure because we possess what they lack, memory and dignity. True words, Sasha, Putin responded, a sense of approval in his voice. Standing by the window, Lukashenko gazed at the unyielding lights of Minsk, whose quiet confidence felt almost like the city was listening to their dialogue. You know what's truly ironic, Volody, he said with a reflective tone. I told him, Trump lifted sanctions and opened air travel with the US, yet here you are, closing your borders. Think about it, who's the real ally and who's the enemy? As they laughed together, the weight of past grievances lightened, replaced by a shared understanding bounded in the fabric of history. But lurking beneath, the question of respect still hung in the air. Would they be seen as partners or merely as a forgotten past? Urgent news. Just moments ago, the world was shaken by a gripping tale of military drills. The year is 2025, and panic grips Poland as President Karol Nawrocki hastily closes the border with Belarus. Meanwhile, Alexander Lukashenko picks up the phone and calls him. What did this Belarusian leader say that left Nawrocki speechless? Why are murmurs of shame for Poland echoing across Europe? Stay tuned because the revelations are shocking. On that pivotal day, Alexander Lukashenko entered his office not as a seasoned diplomat but like a man inspecting a collective farm. Clad in a slightly oversized, modest gray suit, he projected confidence. While the phone on his desk flickered insistently, signaling the urgency for action, the sounds of tanks roared and artillery boomed from the recent drills named West 2025. The Western media fanned the flames, suggesting that Russia and Belarus were preparing for an assault on Warsaw. In Warsaw, Nawrocki, ambitious yet inexperienced, reacted hastily. His perfectly combed hair and tailored suits couldn't hide the fear that gripped him. Close the border, he ordered, perceiving the maneuvers as a clear threat. Yet in Minsk, Lukashenko merely smirked and remarked to his aide, he's scared. When he dialed Nawrocki, the connection was immediate. The Polish president stumbled through his words, attempting to sound brave, despite the panic evident in his voice. Your exercises alarm us. We see them as a potential threat. Lukashenko's calm reply sliced through the tension. What do you fear, Karol? We have never harmed anyone. Surely the enemies you create are of your own making. A heavy silence followed. Suddenly, Lukashenko pressed, what about your NATO exercises? Is that friendship? Your soldiers march our borders under foreign flags. We say nothing. The truth landed on Nawrocki's shoulders like a weight. Soviet soldiers saved you once. Now you shut the door on their legacy? Nawrocki struggled to respond, choking back defensiveness. Lukashenko's voice softened, fear has gripped Europe. You feed it with your actions. In truth, we want friendship. The conversation hung in the air, tension rising, akin to smoke thickening in a room. Their words swirled, underscoring history's weight and the stark realities of their nations. In that moment, Lukashenko found a hint of understanding amidst the chaos. Your tanks would not have saved Warsaw. The Red Army did. History stands in judgment over your choices. Exhausted from their verbal sparring, they each understood the gravity of their standings. The call lingered long after it ended. Nawrocki gazed out of his office, the city lights twinkling, but an unsettling thought burrowed into his mind. Had they truly forgotten? Could history blur through the lens of fear and politics? As Lukashenko hung up, he chuckled softly to Putin. Nawrocki feared shadows, closing borders because of mere drills. We were just digging potatoes. Putin chuckled back, recognizing the seriousness veiled in humor. They think sanctions will break us. Let's show them our strength, our unity, our history. Outside the space of their conversation, the very stakes of their dialogue echoed through history. A reminder of the fault lines between fear and legacy. In an extraordinary turn of events, just moments ago, the world was shaken by a startling story surrounding military drills known as West 2025. Panic engulfed Poland as President Karol Nawrocki hastily closed the border with Belarus, prompting Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko to swiftly pick up the phone and call him. What shocking message from Lukashenko left Nawrocki speechless? And why are whispers of disgrace surrounding Poland echoing throughout Europe? Stick around, and you will be astounded. As the phone rang, Alexander Lukashenko appeared less a diplomat and more like a stern farm overseer dressed in his worn gray suit. He strolled with the confident stride of someone used to resolving issues without bureaucracy. The phone on his desk pulsated with a persistent glow, urging him to act. The military exercises had just concluded, tanks rumbling over fragments of earth, and artillery crews meticulously wrapping up operations. Made weary by a week of tension, pilots eased onto the tarmac with a distinct blend of exhaustion and relief. However, amidst this semblance of normalcy, an uproar brewed. Western media fanned rumors, claiming that Russia and Belarus were gearing up for an offensive on Warsaw. The pressure reached a boiling point, and new Polish President Karol Nawrocki, ambitious yet inexperienced, hastily opted to shut down the border, framing it as a bold act for Europe's security. In Minsk, there was little more than a smirk from Lukashenko, who remarked to his aide, "He's scared." Tension crackled through the line as the Polish president's voice trembled. Strained in a veneer of confidence. "Mr. Lukashenko," he began, "your exercises are alarming us in Warsaw. We see them as a potential threat." "Oh, come now, why the fear?" Lukashenko's voice was steady, almost jovial. "We've never troubled anyone. You're just conjuring enemies. Remember, it was the Soviet soldier who liberated Warsaw, not the tanks that now march under your flag." A silence followed, heavy with history. Nawrocki grappled for words, but the weight of reality crushed his retort. The memories of past sacrifices hung like specters in the air. "You know," Lukashenko continued with a pedagogical tone, "your tanks would not protect Warsaw. Soviet soldiers laid their lives here, and now you bar the way for their descendants. Doesn't that stir a sense of moral conflict?" Nawrocki cleared his throat, attempts to interrupt failing miserably. As Lukashenko's voice softened, he added, "You're caught up in Europe's dread of Russia, a fear fabricated to maintain control. But reflect on this, how many sanctions have rained down upon Belarus and Russia? No nation withstands such pressure without enduring scars. Yet here we are, thriving amidst adversity." The conversation lingered until ultimate silence marked its end. Lukashenko had said all he intended to. Leaning back in his chair, he told his aide, "He's evidently intimidated by tanks and chose to build walls. We're just out here harvesting potatoes." Meanwhile, in his dimly lit office in Warsaw, Nawrocki surveyed the city through heavy curtains. The streetlights illuminated a bustling city, echoing with life. Yet, a sense of dread gripped him. As if the world he knew teetered on the brink of collapse. The conversation with Lukashenko clung to his thoughts. How had it come to pass that Poland now feared not German columns but tractors galloping gracefully on a range? What had happened to the cherished memory of the liberators who had laid their lives down for their freedom? Memory fades when replaced by convenient narratives. Putin's voice infiltrated his mind as he connected the dots of historical truths. The legends of Russian threats circled fiercely over Brussels, nurtured and expanded. Yet, in the calm, the wave of certainty surged within him, igniting a flicker of resolve. As he paced, each footstep echoed the decisions made by countless forebears who had walked that very floor. Is the past truly lost? He pondered silently, recalling his grandfather's tales of brave Soviet soldiers entering Warsaw. No doubt they were misunderstood now. If only people hadn't so quickly forged images of enemies that weren't there. Just then, his phone erupted, slicing through the tension with urgency. Brussels demanded a response, his allies awaited clarity. Border closed, he muttered under his breath, realizing he could not deliver hollow reassurances. His heart sank as he returned to his desk, whispering to himself, "What if we truly have forgotten?" Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room in Minsk, Lukashenko, tapping a pencil idly, found himself staring at reports lying open on his desk, agriculture initiatives, energy proposals, thank you letters from grateful citizens. Each piece was tangible, their lives woven through the fabric of Belarus, far more real than any imagined threat from abroad. Listen, Vova. We know the true cost of fear, he declared firmly into the phone. Despite the borders closing, papers clutched tight in Brussels, fierce headlines about a supposed Russian threat blaring, Lukashenko remained undeterred. Let them be afraid. It's their choice, he added. We will live, work, nurture our children, and remember those who secured our right to exist. Memories of shared struggles, laughter amidst clarity, blossomed between Lukashenko and Putin. They both sensed the inexplicable bond of resilience, bolstered by history. Do you know the irony, Vova? He queried, gazing out at the serene, twinkling lights of Minsk. Trump lifted sanctions and reopened skies for flights, while our friend in Warsaw locks the borders. Think of who's really the ally and who's the foe. Putin's voice returned softly, the world may change, but the fear lingers as long as we remain strong. In this complex tapestry of power dynamics and national histories, the truth clung tightly. As the night unfolded, unity and courage bubbled just beneath the surface, ready to challenge the world. They both laughed softly, a sound that resonated with a sense of release. Their conversation meandered through simple truths, statements that, in the European political arena, felt almost revolutionary. As the night cloaked Minsk in a gentle glow, vehicles glided past on the avenues, and pedestrians hurried home to embrace their waiting families. Everything exuded peace. While borders were being fortified in Warsaw and resolutions drafted in Brussels, alarmist headlines screamed of an impending Russian threat. Let them fear, he finally remarked. Fear was their choice. Their choice was to live, work, raise children, and honor those who had granted them the right to exist. Exactly, Putin echoed. As long as our spirit remains strong, no sanctions will bend us. The conversation unfolded further. They delved into specifics, trade agreements, new projects, fresh initiatives, but the essence had already been laid bare. In that exchange, there was a mix of politics and philosophy. Two leaders, each in their own right, reaffirmed that memory has its strength, overshadowing fear. When the call ended, Lukashenko sat silently for a few moments. He sensed that Novrotsky, having barricaded the border, was likely now pacing within his palace, riddled with doubt. Alexander Grigorievich had sown a vital seed in his soul, one that would surely bloom. The following dawn, King Novrotsky awoke before the sun, plagued by a restless night. Fragments of Lukashenko's words spiraled through his mind, echoing louder than the voices of his own advisors who had tirelessly warned of the Russian threat and the necessity for decisive action. In Warsaw, the air felt heavy, thickened not by the weather, but by the weight of political tension. The morning newspapers blared with sensationalist headlines: President defends nation from Russian threat. Borders closed. Poland is safe. Images of Novrotsky flashed across the internet, showcasing a steely-eyed leader, yet he saw only a man desperately attempting to mask his own fears. In the cabinet, advisors convened around a long dark oak table, voices raised as each tried to outshout the other. Mr. President, we must strengthen our collaboration with NATO. We urgently need to request additional troops from the Americans. Lukashenko and Putin are waiting for the moment we let our guard down. King Novrotsky listened, but his thoughts drifted back to the conversation from that fateful night. In a tense meeting room, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Advisors urged Polish President Karol Nawrocki to strengthen ties with NATO. They insisted on requesting additional American troops, fearing that Alexander Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin waited eagerly for Poland to lower its guard. Yet, Nawrocki's mind wandered back to his recent conversation with the Belarusian leader, wrestling with the memories rather than the clamoring voices around him. He gazed out the window and noticed the remnants of war etched into the facade of an old building across the street. Faded bullet holes served as a haunting reminder of the price of freedom. His grandfather's stern, wrinkled face flashed through his mind, a man who had spoken of Soviet soldiers with profound respect. If it weren't for them, Karol, you wouldn't be here, he had said. Those words resounded more vividly than the urgent briefings of his ministers. With a sudden wave of determination, he raised his hand, silencing his advisors. "Gentlemen," he began, "do you truly believe that Belarus was preparing to attack us?" The room fell into a stunned silence. No one expected such a question. A nervous gray-haired minister coughed softly, trying to regain composure. "The Russian-Belarusian drills always pose a risk," he asserted. "Risk or just a reason to panic?" Naraki interrupted, his voice steady but questioning, as a mix of confusion and disbelief washed over the faces of his advisors. They anticipated their leader to echo the familiar chants of threat, not to provoke uncomfortable inquiries. "I spoke with Lukashenko," he continued. "And do you know what he said?" "That we are closing ourselves off from those who liberated us." Shifting in their seats, some advisors frowned, others lowered their gazes, but none dared to counter directly. "We live under the shadow of fears," Naraki declared firmly. "But fear is a poor advisor. Poland should stand strong, not because we rely on foreign armies, but because we honor those who granted us our freedom." The weight of his own words surprised him, stirring something deep within. An uneasy glance passed among the advisors, breaking the silence. A young diplomat hesitantly asked, "Mr. President, do you doubt our course?" Naraki fixed his gaze on the diplomat, responding thoughtfully. "I doubt that a path founded on fear can lead to peace." Just then, a message interrupted the conversation. Brussels was demanding an immediate report. "The border is closed, Poland stands firm." A heavy sigh escaped Naraki. He understood the stakes. If he deviated from the EU line now, his own political elite might turn against him. Yet if he followed, he would remain shackled by others' anxieties. After dismissing the meeting, he stepped onto the palace balcony. Warsaw stirred to life below him, people hurried to work, cafes opened their doors, trams clanged as they glided along the tracks. The city pulsed with vibrancy, contrasting sharply with Naraki's turbulent thoughts. Could Poland find strength not in fear, but in honoring its past? Just then, a fleeting memory swept over him, the warmth of his grandfather's hand, the stories of sacrifice and dignity, reminding him of the true essence of freedom. Would he really forsake that legacy for a fear-driven agenda? As he wrestled with this question, the weight of history bore down on him, its implications reverberating against the backdrop of a city awakened from a long slumber. How could he confront both the ghosts of the past and the pressures of the present? In that moment, the future of Poland hung in the balance, suspended between memory and the demands of an uncertain world. In a world where tensions are rising, a startling story unfolds that grips the heart of Europe. Just moments ago, the Polish president, Karol Nawrocki, faced a sudden crisis, shutting down the border with Belarus amidst military exercises labeled West 2025. Panic-stricken, he received an unexpected phone call from Alexander Lukashenko, the Belarusian leader. What words were exchanged that left Nawrocki momentarily speechless? And why are whispers of disgrace echoing across Poland? Stay tuned, and you'll find out. As the fateful phone call took place, Lukashenko appeared not as a powerful politician but rather, a local farmer. Clad in a simple gray suit, he marched forth with an air of casual confidence, embodying the man who thrives on real-life solutions, not protocol. The flickering phone light beckoned him, a call from a man drenched in insecurity. Not too far away, the tanks rumbled across the drilling grounds, playing their part in the grand show. Yet the press exaggerated the exercise, pinning an image of aggression and impending doom on Belarus. The jitters spread, culminating in Nawrocki's hurried closing of the border, an action seen by observers as little more than a panicked overreaction. When the phone rang, Nawrocki's heart raced. His voice quavered under the pressure, but he pushed through, asserting, "Mr. Lukashenko, your exercises are troubling us. We view them as a threat." The retort he received was not one of fury but a calm, mocking counter. "What are you afraid of, King? We've harmed no one. It's you who fabricates your own enemies." Silence enveloped the line. Was it a threat or a reminder of history? The tension hung thick in the air. The exchange continued, with Lukashenko dissecting every defense Nawrocki could muster. The Belarusian leader forced him to recall the sacrifices of the past and the grim irony of Poland's current fear. Your tanks would not shelter Warsaw. It was Soviet soldiers who brought you life. The words struck deep. How could Navratsky retort against history's relentless truths? He needed to uphold the narrative European allies expected, yet the weight of reality bore down on him. As night fell in Warsaw, Navratsky retreated to the solitude of his office, his thoughts consumed by Lukashenko's words. You close your doors against those who saved you? The reflection haunted him. Outside, life continued unabated, the city's hum traced with histories hidden beneath every stone. Glancing at his grandfather's memoir on a shelf, Navratsky couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was amiss in how he viewed friendship and enmity. The call from the American ambassador buzzed through the silence, a reminder of the external pressure he felt. Yet, he let the phone ring unanswered, desperately needing to comprehend his own fragmented thoughts. In the stillness of that moment, he realized it's not just a facade, it's a truth that cuts much deeper than any political agenda. What does it mean for Poland to forge alliances built on historical neglect? Under the soul-stirring glow of the office lights, Navratsky's resolve wavered as memories echoed like distant drumbeats. The more he considered Lukashenko's poignant truth, the more questions bubbled in his mind. What if his steadfast beliefs were built on shaky ground? Could turning away from the past, from those who liberated them, actually jeopardize Poland's future? As he allowed his thoughts to swirl, the weight of potential betrayal sank deeper, making it almost suffocating. His reverie was suddenly broken by the insistent ringing of the phone. But this time, it was Lukashenko dialing again, bringing with him a familiar and yet unsettling conversation. You know, this entire mess is just a shadow of your own making. The playful mockery in his tone seemed to wrap around Navratsky, igniting a flicker of frustration within him. The irony was rich, and the games of power hung in the balance. With a tension so thick, it begged resolution. What further revelations awaited them both, questions trailing like smoke. The story unfolds, revealing layers of political tension, tradition, and the ghosts of the past haunting the leaders of today, the struggle between fear and courage, isolation and unity, echoes of history reminding us who and what we truly are. Could they evolve from adversaries to allies, or were they doomed to dance around the shadows of history forever? As the conversation continued into the night, destiny intertwined their fates, questions danced like flames, leaving us wondering, when will fear yield to understanding? The atmosphere was thick with tension as the news of military exercises rattled across Europe. In a moment of panic, Poland's president, Karol Nawrocki, made a hasty decision to close the border with Belarus. But in a twist of fate, it was not the westward threats that echoed in his mind, but a singular call from Belarus leader, Alexander Lukashenko, that silenced Karol. What did Lukashenko say that left Nawrocki speechless? On that fateful day, Alexander G. Lukashenko was not the polished diplomat many envisioned, but rather an imposing figure, dressed simply, radiating authority. The meeting wasn't about formalities, it was about power and perception. The military exercises, labeled West 2025, had concluded. Tanks thundered across the grounds, artillery teams trained to perfection, and pilots landed their aircraft after a week of stress. However, the European press had blown the event out of proportion, raising fears of an impending assault on Warsaw. In the Polish capital, President Nawrocki faced his anxieties head-on. Ambitious yet inexperienced, he struggled to assert his authority. As whispers of threats filled the air, he rushed to secure the border, framing his actions as a protective measure for Europe. But in Minsk, Lukashenko saw it differently, a mere sign of fear. Are you afraid? Lukashenko's voice floated through the static of the phone line, calm yet piercing, cutting through Nawrocki's bravado. The unwavering confidence of the Belarusian leader felt like a dark shadow behind his thinly veiled courage. History spoke volumes. He reminded Nawrocki that the Soviet soldiers had been the ones to rescue Poland from faceless fears. As silence enveloped the call, it was evident, the weight of history hung heavily in the air. Your tanks would not have saved Warsaw, it was the Red Army that stood as your shield, Lukashenko asserted. The truth rang clear, echoing through Nawrocki's mind. He could envision soldiers who had once marched to save their people, now they were the ghosts haunting his consciousness, challenging his every thought. What was the lesson here? The young president mulled over his next move, both anxious and resolved. Struggling with his thoughts, he felt the enormity of his role pressing down on him. The world outside continued its rhythm, indifferent to his personal turmoil. Suddenly, he was reminded of another moment with his grandfather's histories. In that moment of solitude, would he choose fear or strength? The question ricocheted in his mind, clamoring for an answer. Just as illumination dawned, another call jarred his thoughts. Brussels was demanding answers, waiting for his commitment. The weight of expectation pressed against his chest like a vice. Is this the legacy I want to leave? He whispered to himself, staring at his reflection, a man clothed in power yet engulfed by uncertainty. The reflection mirrored an internal conflict. Who was he supposed to be? A strong leader for his allies, or a man molded by ancestral truths longing for peace? The phone rang again, shattering his contemplation. Alexander Lukashenko, having sensed a shift, called back, this time with a challenge wrapped softly in laughter. They panic over shadows, Carol. Shadows. Would Naraki find the courage to redefine what it meant to lead, to stand back from those shadows, or would fear guide his actions, trapping him in the echoes of history? The urgent question pressed, reverberating through the night, as he held the phone tightly, the sound of the city outside merging with his rising doubts. And then, silence enveloped him again, hanging in the air like an unanswered question, leaving the future delicately poised, ready for a decision that would echo through history. The clock ticked in the stillness of the room. The President of Poland, standing before the mirror, confronted the eyes of a man who wore an expensive suit yet bore the weight of uncertainty. In that moment, a whisper echoed in his mind, "Who am I?" He began pacing, the steps heavy as he contemplated the choice before him. A politician in Europe, or the grandson of those saved by others? Amidst the silence, he settled at his desk and grasped a blank sheet of paper. At first, the pen trembled in his hand, but with each letter formed, his resolve solidified. This wasn't merely a statement for the world, it was a letter to himself. He recognized a harsh truth within his words: we've shut our borders against those who once gave us life. Our fear isn't of their tanks but of the memories that linger. The realization struck him: without memory, there could be no future. He wrote on, pages unfurling like the dawn outside. Once finished, he folded the letter and tucked it away, realizing that tomorrow would bring a different announcement from him, one that Brussels would not anticipate. He couldn't articulate what it would be just then, but there was newfound clarity swelling in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to be honest. Outside, Warsaw stirred into life, the sun casting a golden glow over the city. Meanwhile, in Minsk, the dawn began with a different energy. The Independence Palace was alive with activity, guards changing shifts, aides scurrying, the air filled with the symphony of ringing phones and clicking heels. Yet, in Alexander Lukashenko's office, an unusual calm reigned. Behind his imposing desk strewn with reports, he awaited a briefing. The head of his administration entered. A sharply dressed man, clutching a dossier. "Mr. President," he started, "the Polish press speaks of Nawrocki's indecisiveness. Brussels awaits a strong statement, but silence hangs over Warsaw. Advisors argue, some push for pressure, others advocate dialogue." Lukashenko raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming. "Then the seat has fallen to the ground," he replied coolly. "I spoke to him yesterday. Doubts linger in that young man's heart. If his grandfather shared true tales of war, the memory lives on within him." His assistant nodded, yet a thread of obligation to Brussels and Washington lingered. Obligation? Lukashenko laughed softly. "You know what that means? Just paper with signatures. Paper can be torn. But memories? Those can never be erased." In a world where history often fades, a chilling conversation unfolds between two leaders at a crucial juncture. Their destinies collide as President Karol Nawrocki of Poland grapples with fear, while Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus calls into question the very foundations of loyalty and memory. What shocking truths will be revealed to shatter the status quo? With a heavy heart and measured steps, Lukashenko paced his office. Each footfall echoed not just physically but with the weight of history. "Europe has long forgotten what honor means," he stated, shaking his head. "It's all calculations and politics now." Yet for the Polish people, the past runs deep in their veins. They may lean toward Brussels, but inside, they know who truly safeguarded their country. Peering out the window, he watched the city coming alive. Workers rushed past, schoolchildren clutched their bags, and women maneuvered through crowded streets. This was proof of simple resilience. Life marched on. This is our purpose, he mused. For children to attend school, for people to wake knowing there will be bread tomorrow, that peace awaits. The thought lingered ominously over him, knowing Europe perceives threats as a means to control. But no, they would not be broken. His assistant listened intently. He sensed this was more than idle banter, it was a call to the ages, a moment steeped in reflection. Just then, the foreign minister entered, urgency in his stride. Mr. President, he said, we have new intel. Naraki has cancelled part of his meetings with the American delegation, citing fatigue. Our contacts in Warsaw believe he's wavering. A wry smile crept across Lukashenko's face. There it is. My words must have struck a chord. He leaned back in his chair, contemplating the unfolding narrative. Perhaps it's time for us to reach out again, the minister cautiously proposed. No, Lukashenko interjected firmly. Let him come to his own conclusions. Pushing too hard shows weakness, and we will not be the oppressors. We speak the truth and allow it to take root. He settled back at his desk, palms flat against the cool surface, finality in his posture. While Europe plays chess with foreign pieces, we engage in the game of life. In this game, we hold the advantage. The truth of history stands behind us. The minister nodded, gathered his files, and exited. Alone once again, Lukashenko picked up his internal phone. Bring in the staff from my office, he instructed. Prepare documents showcasing our post-war assistance to Poland. Include everything, factory restoration, energy support, and scientific collaboration. If Naraki still hesitates, we'll provide him with undeniable facts. Each moment etched deeper into the tapestry of their conversation, the future hanging precariously in the balance. Will the truths of the past pave the way for a different tomorrow? In the dimly lit room, Alexander Lukashenko sat alone, his mind racing with thoughts of the Polish crisis. He reached for the internal communication line. Bring in the team, he instructed. Prepare materials on our post-war assistance to Poland. Include everything, factory restorations, energy, and science. If Nawrocki still doubts, we'll show him the facts. After half an hour, thick folders filled with documents and photographs filled his office. Black and white images showcased Soviet engineers alongside Polish workers at brand new machines. Maps revealing the restoration of railroads and reports detailing the supply of machinery, equipment, and medical supplies lay before him. As Lukashenko flipped through the pages, he addressed an unseen audience. Look here, Carol. We rebuilt your factories when we had nothing ourselves. We shared our bread during times of hunger. And now you're closing your doors on us. He shut the folder, taking a deep breath, his resolve unwavering. He will remember, sooner or later. The sun rose outside, its light pouring into the office and reflecting off the lacquered table. The day was just beginning, but Lukashenko knew more challenges were on the horizon, challenges that wouldn't be decided in Brussels or Washington, but in the heart of one man, Nawrocki, in Warsaw. As evening enveloped the city, an orange glow stretched across the sky. The presidential palace was aglow, resembling a ship poised for nightfall. Inside, tensions rose as President Nawrocki sat at the long table in a meeting room, facing a stern delegation from Brussels and American representatives. The atmosphere was electric. Each phrase sounded like a command rather than a request. Mr. President, said the Eurocommissioner, his narrow face and cold gaze fixed upon Nawrocki. Europe expects decisive action from you. Poland must prove to be a reliable bastion against Russia and Belarus. Beside him, a stout American diplomat with a confident smile added, We're ready to increase military presence, but we need your agreement and a clear signal. Poland must be NATO's outpost. Nawrocki listened attentively, his gut churning. They looked at him not as an ally but as an executor, a pawn in a dangerous game. Their polished words masked a grim reality. Poland was expected to absorb any blow that might come from the east. He raised his hand, commanding silence in the room, his thoughts racing. Why was he feeling cornered? His instincts screamed rebellion against their expectations. What if they saw Poland only as a shield? What about its sovereignty? This was not just about allegiances, it was about identity. The moment struck like a bell, resonating in the charged air around him. Would he conform to their demands? Or would he stand firm against the tide? With every moment of uncertainty, a decision loomed closer, threatening to tip the scales of history. As his mind battled against the pressure from all sides, Nawrocki felt the weight of his ancestors urging him to remember. Would his choice echo their sacrifices, or bury them under the weight of political games? As the weight of history hung thick in the air, he shaped his response, determined to carve his own path. Would he rise as a beacon of strength, or fade into the shadows of compliance? The pressure mounted, and silence enveloped the room, pregnant with possibility. A storm is brewing in Europe, ignited by a seemingly innocuous military exercise. Just moments ago, Poland's President Karol Nawrocki closed the border with Belarus in a panic. What did Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko say during their tense phone call that left Nawrocki speechless? And why are whispers of disgrace echoing through Europe? Prepare for a shocking revelation. In a modest office, a tension-filled silence enveloped the room as Nawrocki raised his hand, demanding attention. "Gentlemen," he began, voice steady yet filled with unspoken weight. "Poland has always honored its commitments. But my people are weary of living in fear. They yearn for peace." An American delegate scoffed, as if mocking the innocence of his words. "Peace is achieved through strength, Mr. President. You must be resolute." Nawrocki's gaze sharpened, recalling Lukashenko's words, "We have never threatened anyone. You create your own enemies." Suddenly, a thought surged forth: what if strength makes us the puppets? The room fell silent, the air thick with unease. The European Commissioner frowned deeply. "Mr. President," he cautioned, "those words could be misinterpreted." Leaning forward, Nawrocki countered boldly, "Maybe it's time we stop fearing our own shadows. Poland remembers who saved us, and I won't let our history become a weapon against those who brought us life." His declaration was audacious, reverberating within the chamber. The American leaned back, eyes narrowing, while the commissioner exchanged tense glances with his colleagues. "Are you risking it all?" he asked coldly. "Europe won't understand softness," Nawrocki shot back, the conviction in his voice rising. "Without memory, there is no future." The meeting concluded in a stifling hush, delegations slipping away like whispers in the night, leaving behind a chilling void. As the doors closed, Nawrocki sighed deeply, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability. His advisor entered, a young diplomat with worry etched on his face. "Mr. President, do you realize the storm you've just unleashed?" "Let there be a storm," Nawrocki replied, resolute. "I refuse to let Poland live in fear." He approached the window, gazing at the vibrant lights of Warsaw. Laughter and life thrived below, blissfully ignorant of the tense negotiations. Perhaps ignorance was a blessing, he mused. For them, all of this was worth it. That evening, he began drafting a speech, one devoid of the usual threats and defenses. But as he penned each word, a voice echoed in his mind: "What if strength makes us the puppets?" The realization weighed heavily on him. What if the facade of power was merely a mask? And just then, a chilling thought struck him: what if the past is indeed coming back to haunt them? In the quiet of his office, as he pondered this unsettling truth, his phone buzzed to life, breaking the silence. It was a call from Brussels, and suddenly, the stakes felt higher than ever. Would he stand firm or crumble under pressure? The previous part described the vibrant streets of Warsaw, where people were unaware of the tense negotiations taking place. President Karol Nawrocki reflected on the importance of his speech, feeling a mix of determination and apprehension. He was ready to challenge the usual narrative about threats and borders. Instead of the expected rhetoric about danger and fortification, he chose to speak about memory, gratitude for the past, and the vision of Poland as a bridge rather than a wall. He knew this speech could spark controversy in Brussels, but for the first time in a long while, he would be expressing his own words, not echoing those from foreign capitals. As the clock struck midnight, Nawrocki set down his pen, his resolve reflected in his eyes. The morning in Warsaw was bright and crisp, with the sharpness of autumn in the air underscoring the moment's significance. Journalists, diplomats, and military personnel crowded the city center, all awaiting the president's address. The atmosphere was electric with tension, as everyone anticipated the usual talk of Russian threats and the need for unwavering allegiance to Europe. Nawrocki stood backstage, clutching the speech he'd written, his heart pounding. He recalled his grandfather's words, "Karol, freedom is not just a flag and anthem. Freedom is truth, even when it's uncomfortable." A secretary approached, whispering, "Mr. President, everyone is ready." Nawrocki nodded and stepped up to the podium. As he did, the crowd fell silent, microphones capturing his every breath. Cameras focused on his youthful face, already marked by the fatigue of recent weeks. "Dear citizens of Poland," he began, his voice steady yet devoid of false aggression. "These last days have been filled with anxiety. Our neighbors conducted military exercises, which many in Europe viewed as a threat. But I want to tell you, fear cannot be the foundation of our policy. We must not fear shadows." Journalists exchanged glances, his tone was unexpected. "Poland is a country that knows the value of freedom," Nawrocki continued. "We understand struggle and memory. I will not allow that memory to be erased. In World War II, it was Soviet soldiers who saved our land from Nazism. They sacrificed their lives for Warsaw, and we must remember that." The crowd stood still, the gravity of his words sinking in. In a tense moment that shifted the political landscape, Polish President Karol Nawrocki delivered a bold proclamation, emphasizing the value of memory and freedom. He declared, "We know what it means to struggle, what it means to remember. I will not allow that memory to be erased. It was the Soviet soldiers who saved our land from Nazism in World War II, giving their lives for Warsaw." The crowd fell silent. His audacity sparked mixed emotions. Some nodded in agreement, while others tensed, the weight of history hanging in the air. Nawrocki challenged the prevailing narrative of fear in Europe: build walls, close borders, seek enemies. He countered, "Poland must be a bridge, not a wall. We should forge a future, not be imprisoned by the past." Camera flashes erupted among journalists. One whispered, "This is revolutionary," recognizing Nawrocki's divergence from expectations in Brussels. He paused, locking eyes with the cameras. "We don't have to abandon our alliances, but decisions must reflect our history and memories. And those memories tell us to respect those who gave us life." Each word resonated like a bell tolling. The crowd buzzed with reactions, applause mixed with murmurs of dissent. European diplomats shifted uneasily. The American representative frowned, jotting notes, while an EU commissioner's anxious expression betrayed concern. Nawrocki finished with a powerful statement: "I urge Europe to remember, without memory, there is no future. I believe Poland can exemplify how respect triumphs over fear." As he stepped away from the podium, applause mingled with rising discontent, transforming the stage into an arena of clashing emotions. A disheveled advisor rushed to him, cautioning, "Mr. President, do you realize this will stir a storm? Brussels will be furious." Nawrocki, weary yet resolute, replied, "Let the storm come. I spoke what needed to be said." Meanwhile, Alexander Lukashenko sat watching the broadcast intently from his office in Minsk, a smirk on his face as Nawrocki mentioned memory. "Well, Karol, it seems the seeds have sprouted." He switched off the television and summoned his aides, instructing them to inform Putin, "The Pole is starting to think for himself." Reports of the speech were already filtering into the Kremlin, where a focused silence preceded a dramatic shift in the political atmosphere. The world watched unfold two leaders grappling with history, fear, and identity. And which way will Poland move now that Nawrocki challenged the status quo? As Europe holds its breath, tensions mount high, expectations unravel, and a flickering hope for a new dawn emerges amidst uncertainty. Amidst rising tensions, Europe's leaders are left reeling. Will Poland fortify its stance, or could this moment birth a more united front in respect of shared history? The echoes of their words ripple across the continent, demanding answers, igniting debates, and forging paths. The specter of the past looms large over the present. The struggle for identity is far from over. As whispers fill the halls of power from Brussels to Moscow, the lasting effects of today's words may just reshape tomorrow's reality, echoing through history like the tolling of a bell. When Navratsky mentioned memory, a smirk spread across Lukashenko's face. "Well, Karol, it seems the seeds have sprouted," he muttered. He switched off the television and called his aides, directing them to inform Putin that the Pole was starting to think for himself. Meanwhile, whispers of Navratsky's remarks had reached the Kremlin, where an intense silence reigned, punctuated only by the weight of history. What sparked such a bold statement from a president who had always played it safe? Putin listened intently, delivering a curt response. "Interesting, not everyone in Europe is ready to live solely in fear." At that very moment, chaos erupted in Brussels. Phones buzzed furiously as European commissioners frantically dialed each other, dissecting the controversial statement from the Polish president. In Washington, a press release was being drafted with urgency, reflecting the political turmoil ignited by Navratsky's unexpected words. Conversations erupted in Polish households, over kitchen tables, on trams, in bustling markets. Whispers of admiration mingled with murmurs of concern. Finally, the president spoke. The truth echoed through the air, yet a few warned, "He's playing with fire." The atmosphere crackled with tension, indifference was absent. Navratsky sat in his office after the storm of reactions. His speech lay before him, the paper a tangible reminder of the weight behind every word he had uttered. It resonated in his ears, a haunting melody of resolve and uncertainty. He understood the gravity of the moment. There was no turning back now. The floodgates had opened. News spread faster than morning coffee could brew, sweeping across the globe. Television channels replayed excerpts relentlessly, highlighting powerful phrases. "We must not fear the shadows." "Soviet soldiers saved our land." "Poland must be a bridge, not a wall." In Brussels, emergency meetings convened. The atmosphere was dense with anxiety as officials wore grim faces, as if they had endured a personal affront. One commissioner, speaking with barely contained fury, declared, "The Polish president is playing a dangerous game. He's undermining European unity. If he continues down this path, trust will be lost." American diplomats added fuel to the fire, exclaiming, "This is unacceptable. If Poland begins to waver, the entire eastern flank of NATO will falter. We must act decisively." But within Poland, the sentiment diverged. The morning after the speech, social media exploded with comments from ordinary citizens. "At last, our president is voicing what we've all thought," some chimed, while others reminisced about family stories from the war. The hashtag "Did Navratsky's boldness mark the dawn of a new era for Poland?" As the echoes of the past mingled with the uncertainties of the present, a sense of awakening stirred within the heart of the nation. Amidst a deepening crisis, the world was rocked by alarming news. Just moments ago, a surprising twist emerged from military exercises known as Western 2025. Panic erupted as the president of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, hastily sealed the border with Belarus. A bold phone call was made. Alexander Lukashenko himself reached out. What could have possibly rendered Nawrocki speechless? And why is Europe whispering about a disgrace in Poland? Stay tuned, the shocking revelations await. In a simple gray suit, Lukashenko radiated an air of authority, devoid of pretentiousness. It was as if he was preparing for a routine visit to inspect a local farm rather than addressing international affairs. The flicker of the phone demanded urgency as the sound of tanks echoed from the military exercises, artillery fired in the distance. Reports surged with sensationalism as the European press painted a grim picture of an impending threat. The fragile nerves of new President Nawrocki shattered. He was ambitious, young, yet inexperienced. Despite his polished appearance and soft-spoken demeanor, self-doubt hung around him like a cloud. "Mr. Lukashenko," he began hesitantly, "your drills in Belarus raise serious concerns here. We can't ignore them." The Belarusian leader's calm yet powerful rebuttal cut through the air like a knife. "What are you afraid of? We've never bothered you. Maybe it's you who are conjuring enemies." Silence hung heavy as the weight of history pressed down on their conversation. The memories of past alliances bubbled to the surface. Your NATO exercises, do those signify friendship? When your soldiers march along our borders, we say nothing. History is not forgotten. Those words stung Navratsky. Any defense he scrambled to articulate dissolved into thin air. As tension continued to simmer, Lukashenko explained as if teaching a lesson. Your tanks wouldn't have saved Warsaw. The Red Army halted a threat once. And now you shut your doors to the descendants of those who liberated you. How could Navratsky counter such historical gravity? The room was thick with unease, palpable and electric. The conversation drifted on, but the truth resonated within Lukashenko's final words: we never intended to threaten. Fear is your European pastime. But look around, how many sanctions have you imposed? They won't break us. With the discussion drawing to a close, Navratsky felt something shift within. As he pondered the past, he found it tough to digest Lukashenko's straightforward perspectives. It suddenly struck him, what if the caricature of an enemy was self-imposed? The thought sent chills down his spine. Could it be that, in an effort to align with a narrative, they had forgotten gratitude and history? The room grew silent, echoing with the weight of unfulfilled obligations. Outside his office, the vibrant lights of Warsaw buzzed to life, oblivious to the internal storm brewing within its leader. His lack of response masked deeper conflicts with governing ideologies clashing against sentimental responsibilities. The phone on his desk flashed, a stark reminder of the present realities. He hesitated, aware that any words spoken now would carry the burden of sincerity or silence. Neither of which he was prepared for. Across the way in Minsk, the air was different. As Lukashenko dialed an old but familiar number, a sense of calm enveloped him. So, how does the truth feel when spoken aloud? He inquired. The answer came with a sigh from Navratsky: difficult. The pressure, especially from Brussels and Washington, they're relentless. A knowing smirk crept across Lukashenko's face. The winds of change are often unsettling, but necessary. You have sparked a discussion no one was brave enough to start. People are responding, deep down, they appreciate it. What if they unseat me? Navratsky's voice trembled, uncertainty lacing his inquiry. Then let them have your speech. A message can outlast a presidency, the Belarusian replied with conviction. Their exchange echoed ancient wisdom. Trust and loyalty forged through shared history can be more powerful than any political platform. The conversation lingered, a fleeting reminder that alliances can exist hidden beneath strained political landscapes, a flicker of understanding in complex times. You will never stand alone, Lukashenko reassured him. As long as there is memory, there will be allies, even if unseen. Through this unexpected connection, the leader felt the burdens of expectation lift, offering a glimpse of hope despite the shadows lingering on the horizon. Summary of the last part. The conversation between President Alexander Lukashenko and President Karol Navratsky continues. Lukashenko reflects on the gratitude he receives from ordinary Belarusians for peace, emphasizing that it's for the people, not for Brussels or Washington. Navratsky is left in silence, pondering his stance. A hidden alliance, the weight of history. As the call ended, darkness draped over Warsaw. President Navratsky stared blankly at the flickering light of the castle outside his window. For the first time, a flicker of conviction ignited within him. Despite the mounting pressure, despite all the threats, he sensed he was on the right side. Miles away in Minsk, Lukashenko hung up the phone, a smirk creeping across his face as he turned to his aide. Look at that, he stopped trembling, finally spoke like a human. Maybe all is not lost. In Europe, a tempest began to brew. Headlines blared from Brussels: Polish president loses his way. Analysts argued heatedly on live television. Some painted Navratsky as pro-Russian, while others cautiously suggested he merely reminded everyone of a past better left unspoken. In Washington, officials convened urgently, declaring a need for a tough response. If Poland wavers, it sets a dangerous precedent, warned one diplomat. Other Eastern European nations might start to question the established line, sending shockwaves through every alliance. Yet, life continued for many in Warsaw. This poignant normalcy struck at the heart of all narratives orchestrated by Brussels and Washington. In bustling markets, lively schools, and buzzing cafes, conversations drifted away from European dictums, focusing instead on what their own president had declared. In small villages, elderly farmers reminisced about Soviet soldiers sharing bread. The youth exchanged memes with bold slogans, not a wall, but a bridge. Even the opposition, noted for bashing every government move, found themselves at a loss. Criticizing Nawrocki meant wading into their own historical complexities. The tension within his office felt palpable, a battlefield of conflicting emotions and responsibilities. Every day ushered an avalanche of phone calls. Ministers warned of harsh repercussions while ambassadors delivered pointed lectures. Allies clamored for a definitive stance. Amidst this chaos, he steeled himself. One evening, as twilight thickened, a shadowy figure entered his office, his Minister of Defense, face drawn, voice steady yet grim. "Mr. President," he said, each word dripping with urgency, "the situation has escalated. We need to act now." What lay ahead for Poland was uncertain. Would loyalty to allies or the echoes of history guide his choices? The stakes had never been this high, and the faint smell of tension lingered in the air, a harbinger of the critical decisions looming before him. Would he follow their demands or forge his own path? The silence hung heavily between them, thick as the evening mist enveloping the city. In a tense atmosphere thick with uncertainty, the President of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, faced an array of mounting pressures. Every day felt like a relentless battle. Calls flooded in. Advisors warned of potential fallout. Allies demanded clarity on his stance. Yet, he held firm. One evening, as dusk settled outside, the defense minister entered his office, a dark expression etched across his face, his voice dry and grave. "Mr. President, I must alert you. Brussels is discussing a potential reassessment of military aid. There are whispers from the United States hinting at troop withdrawals," he stated, his eyes averted, as if the weight of the situation was too much to bear. Nawrocki looked up sharply. "And what do you propose?" he asked, keeping his composure. "Retreat. Say what they expect you to say. Confirm the threats looming over us," the minister suggested, his voice devoid of any hope. Karol rose from his chair, silhouetted against the night's embrace, the twinkling lights of Warsaw reflecting his internal turmoil. "If we live in fear again," echoing others' words, "what's left of our identity? Why bother with a flag or our own history?" The minister fell silent, understanding the futility of debate. That night, Warsaw witnessed an unsanctioned rally. Thousands filled the streets, brandishing banners declaring, "Memory is stronger than fear, and Poland is a bridge, not a wall." Though only a few thousand, their presence was enough to be seen nationwide. They echoed the president's sentiments. Meanwhile, in Minsk, Alexander Lukashenko monitored every development closely. He sat with his tablet, engrossed in live feeds from Polish channels, a grin forming as the crowd's chants reached his ears. "Look, Vova," he remarked in a call with Putin that evening. "The Poles are starting to remember." "I see it," Putin replied, his tone calm but with an undercurrent of hidden energy. They had attempted to erase the memories, but one reminder was all it took to awaken them. "It's just the beginning," Lukashenko continued. "The crucial thing is their president hasn't faltered. I spoke with him. He's holding strong." "Good. That means there's hope," Putin affirmed, recognizing the gravity of the moment. "There are moments in history when one person can alter the course of a nation," said Lukashenko, a tinge of amusement in his voice. "Do you remember how he trembled during our first conversation? Now he's standing tall against Brussels and Washington, he's growing." A quiet laugh floated through the line, the seriousness behind their mirth unmistakable. They both understood that the events unfolding in Warsaw were not trivial, this was a pivotal moment. Meanwhile, cracks began to form across Europe. Would you want to know what happens next? The echoes of history often shape the future, but what if they forgot? What if Poland's fight for its identity was more crucial than anyone anticipated? What could happen when fear clashes with the will to remember? Stay tuned. In the wake of unexpected political turmoil, several European leaders cautiously acknowledged President Karol Nawaki's bold statements. Light sentiments surfaced in Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, hinting at a potential shift. Meanwhile, Italian and Greek media praised the Polish president's courage, igniting a flicker of hope against the backdrop of rising tensions. Yet in Brussels, officials scrambled to extinguish the brewing fire, uncertain of where this newfound bravery might lead. Karol sat alone in his office, late at night, staring through rain-streaked windows. For the first time in ages, he was without paperwork, sipping tea while reflecting on the unexpected relief washing over him. Despite the threats and relentless pressure, he felt liberated. The streets of Warsaw were eerily quiet, as though the city itself had paused, exhaling after days of unrest. The light still flickered in the presidential palace, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Yet he was not alone in his thoughts. A pile of letters sat on his desk, a collection of heartfelt messages from ordinary citizens, students, retirees, and workers. My grandfather fell with Soviet soldiers near Warsaw. Thank you for remembering him. I've grown tired of living in fear. Each note felt like a lifeline. Don't give up. We stand with you. As he read, the weight of his recent days shifted into a steely resolve. Across the continent, meetings in Brussels deliberated the fallout, while Washington drafted reports churning speculation. Contrastingly, in Warsaw, something remarkable was unfolding. Conversations morphed from trivial matters to deep discussions of memory, market talks expanded beyond bread prices to the importance of remembrance. At university, debates ignited over the ethics of honoring the past without sacrificing allies. Family dinners now vibrated with the stories of ancestors, weaving history back into the fabric of their lives. Meanwhile, in Minsk, Alexander Grigorievich comfortably lounged in his chair, tuning into the radio. The announcer's voice echoed with Nawaki's declaration, "Poland must be a bridge, not a wall, remembering the Soviet Union's role in our liberation." A smirk curled on his lips as he turned to his aides, remarking, "Looks like they're grappling with their fears now." Little did they know that this was just the beginning. Would King Nawaki's courageous choice pave the way for transformative dialogues, or would it deepen the divide? As the tension brewed, an unexpected alliance began to form, hinting at a possible rift in European unity. In the stillness of his office, Karol understood choice would lead them beyond fear into a challenging yet hopeful future. What truths waited in the shadows, and how would they shape their destinies? In an unexpected turn, a phone call sparked new discussions. Would the voices of the past guide them to a powerful reckoning, or would fear continue to cloud their vision? The stakes were higher than ever, and the outcome remained uncertain, suspended in the balance. A single decision could change everything. In the previous segment, President of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, publicly called on Europe to remember the Soviet Union's role in liberating Poland, suggesting that Poland should be a bridge, not a wall. This prompted a smile from Alexander Lukashenko, who interpreted the statement as a pivotal moment in shifting the narrative within Europe. Recognizing the importance of this development, Lukashenko prepared to discuss it further with Vladimir Putin. In a dimly lit office in Minsk, Lukashenko stood up with renewed energy, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. A truth-teller has emerged among them, he mused, pacing. This is merely the beginning. That night, as he dialed Putin's number, anticipation buzzed in the air. Did you hear, Volodya? Lukashenko's tone was both triumphant and teasing. They're finally questioning their fears. Let them ponder, are they afraid of our friendship or the ghosts of their past? Putin chuckled softly. Memory outweighs fear, he affirmed. If the Poles remembered even for a moment, it wasn't in vain. Nodding, Lukashenko felt a blend of pride and determination. They had ignited a spark, the rest now belonged to history. Both leaders sensed that tough times lay ahead, with fresh sanctions and strategic maneuvers looming. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a seed of change had taken root in Warsaw, one that could reshape the future. The following morning, a new dawn broke over the city of Warsaw, serenaded by the soft toll of church bells. News outlets buzzed with discussions of Nawrocki's bold statement. Social media erupted in cacophonous debates, and on the streets. Voices mingled, sharing opinions. A curious energy rippled through the air, something significant had shifted. Fear no longer dominated the narrative. Now it intertwined with memory, and alongside memory came hope, a tantalizing promise of reconciliation. While history concluded its chapter, one truth remained evident: any wall may shield in the moment, but it can never protect against the ravages of forgetting. Only by respecting the past can one build a bridge to the future. United in remembrance, nothing, be it sanctions or fears, could drive them apart. As echoes of this moment lingered, the two leaders understood that their conversation had stirred old memories and new ambitions, rippling far beyond their borders. Would Europe embrace its history or shrink back into fear? The world watched and waited, sensing the winds of change blowing stronger.